Wow, do I feel spoiled. I just feel so spoiled here as the person responsible for evaluating all these incredibly great scores. Just one after another has been amazing. And this is definitely a part of that. Yeah, just really great work, Isaac. I'm really enjoying looking at this, really enjoying thinking about all the things I'm going to tell you about it, and also just, really to see your take on it being so different from everybody else's. There are a few little bits and pieces that are kind of strange here and there, like you put a buzz roll on this note. I think people could sort of hear there was kind of a sudden strange a flutter-tonguing sound right on this beat. So that, I guess that's probably just a mistake. And, there are little odds and ends that I will mention here and there. Sometimes I think you're taking too many pains here, in terms of proportion and balance and so on. But the fact that you're thinking about it is extremely important. So, all right. So let's just go over the orchestration bit by bit, and I will try to just incorporate any general comments into the fabric of my evaluation. So starting off here, we're starting off with, da 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 dum, and yeah, felt sticks on a cymbal. Yeah, and you never really get all that loud, right? This is all totally fine, really soft. I mean, you're barely going to feel this in the background until you get to about right here. You might even just be able to stop rolling at this point and then just tie the sustain. That might give you everything that you need in terms of, the sound of what you're doing. Because it's kind of hard to do a reverse diminuendo, or excuse me, a diminuendo roll, kind of reversing the energy of the cymbal. But, mezzo piano is still, I know I'm really fussing over issues like this, but yeah, mezzo piano is still not so big, so much motion in the cymbal that you cannot damp it back down again while continuing to roll. But yeah, once you start getting mezzo forte and louder, the energy of the cymbal wants to just keep going, and when you continue to sort of beat at it with felt sticks, then it just starts to build up energy, and it doesn't want to let go of it. Okay, so yeah, so right here you've got your, hang on, I'm just going to go over here and change this into a transposing score, just to make it, easier for me to read. I'm just used to reading things transposed, and so, actually reading them in C is a bit of a slowdown, right? Okay, so you've got oboe and clarinet in a unison here. So that unison, it's, it'll work fine. You have to be aware that the oboe is going to become more sonorous as it gets lower, as you put the A clarinet into its throat tones down here, right? The B and the A, right? They are going to be somewhat kind of thinner in comparison. But that doesn't mean that you cannot combine clarinet and oboe in unison. There are just so many great examples of it that the fact that it was ever used as an example of two instruments that shouldn't play unison is kind of a mystery. Then English horn, taking the octave below that. I almost wish that there was something doubling the English horn as well, whether, say, a bass clarinet or some other instrument. I notice here at the beginning you don't really tell us how much of each you got. It seems like later on you make the decision to have 3 clarinets, right? But we really need to know that here. 2 oboes, obviously, 2 flutes. Now here, for piccolo, unless you have 2 piccolos intended, then you don't need to mark 1 on it, right? no more than you would for English horn. Okay, and then here, yeah, 4 horns in F, I'm assuming. Yep, and 2 bassoons. Right, so you just really need to know how many of each. Right. Notice that I have actually eliminated some bars here of instruments that are not being used yet. And so that's sort of my fault. Of course, you would want to show all the instruments on the first page. But just in terms of these layouts, it's easier for me to eliminate empty bars, right? So yeah, so you've got more going on here in terms of your clarinet, but you still need to tell us how many. And of course, there's trumpet involved and so on, and other instruments, bass drum that's missing, tam-tam, and so on. Okay, so pretty much the scoring here is okay. You know, I'm not so sure. I mean, it's kind of cool to have that muted sound. There's no question. It's a very kind of understated tone picture that you've got going on here. You know, the way that you've got these specific instruments working together, and you got the roll and the cymbal, and you've also got the muted strings. So it's just really going to be kind of delicate and kind of, I mean, not just delicate, but also the it's a very, well, I keep thinking of the word understated. It's a very standoffish kind of sound, right? As opposed to being sort of kind of like edge of the seat, breathy kind of sound, right? You're not going to get that here. It's going to be, I'm not, dull is the wrong sound, but is the wrong word, but more you know, it's restrained. The feeling is going to be restrained, I think, emotionally as well as in terms of color. Here we've got measured tremolo, which is syncopated, which is great, and you know it is going back and forth between the two. Now I feel that like when you slur these groups, you know, you get that slight feeling of pulse, so that's also a very, very delicate effect. Sometimes it doesn't come through as strongly as it could when large, you know, groups are have very, very long slurs over them. I think this is an error here. I think you probably intended to have the bowing be the same for the divisi groups. The same thing here. So this is probably a copy-paste error. Just kind of warning you in general against arbitrarily copying certain pianistic types of dynamics, right? So I think this is something Lili does in the original score, is just like, you know, uses the romantic crescendo. And, you know, it's just a question in modern music whether or not you intend this to be soft, loud, soft, loud, soft, loud, right? Or whether you intend this to be you know, pianissimo to piano to mezzo piano to mezzo forte, right? So if that's really what you intend, like for to be pianissimo here and end up mezzo forte there, it's better just to have one long hairpin, okay? It's just easier for everybody to understand. Okay, little touches are really nice here. I like this this sort of stack. It's a 2-octave span between these pitches. That's really, really cool as well. And then you've got this right in here. Now this is crossing the break, but it's all playable for the clarinets. I mean, clarinets have like all these workarounds for crossing the break. You know, they've got some little cheat keys like trill keys, and they've got they also just have, you know, they can also just do it, but like maybe not sound as brilliant as you might think. But yeah, crossing the break is one of the first things that a clarinetist learns, and in fact, looking at clarinet manuals, not manuals, but clarinet education books, yeah, I guess a manual you could call it, from like the 19th century, that's one of the first things that they teach. You know, they'll have arpeggio exercises that cross the break like almost immediately, right? So it's not such a weird thing to think about crossing the break like this. Don't let it stop you if that's what you need to do, but if you can avoid it, it's just better scoring. Okay. Now, here you're adding piccolo into the mix as a, like, to sort of work a-two with the first flute. But I'll tell you something, if you just move this to here and start the piccolo here, you get way better results. Okay? Just because, you know, this combination here, you've got the piccolo in one of its weakest areas, right? Close to its weakest area. And you've got flute in one of its beautifully strong areas, right? So this combination here doesn't really do a whole lot for the texture, right? Now, unless you're intending, well, I sort of want to almost strong there with the flute and then stronger as we go on. Yeah, I just kind of feel that's a little... You know, when you consider that you are already putting your flute at a disadvantage here by having it play unison with the oboe in its middle register as you go on, I just don't see like what the big benefit is. So you might as well just go a-two here with your flutes, and then just wait to come in here with the piccolo. All right, because it's, yeah, I mean, it just makes more sense. Now, this is confusing me here. Why do we have two different slurs? Right, we got a big piano-like slur over all of these instruments, and I mean, I guess that will work. But it, you know, it won't really work for the second voice here, right? Like, this is first voice, right? And then here you come in with the second voice, and so the second voice needs its own entrance dynamic, you know, for the conductor and the copyist and the part. And you know, see, here's where you could split into two different hairpins, right? So I would say have a hairpin that goes up to here, and then break it, and then tell us where you want to be, and then another one. Now this just brings up another problem too, and that is mezzo piano crescendo to mezzo forte. That is like barely anything. You know, I mean, it is already bad enough that these are all mezzo dynamics, right? It's like you're not really committing, right? Just like where is the sense of commitment in the winds, right? Why can't you just go up to forte, right? And then let the horns be mezzo forte, subdued underneath or inside the texture rather than blaring out from it, right? That would be a balanced thing. But if you don't want to go above mezzo forte in the tutti here, in the tutti writing, then the horns should not go above mezzo piano, and they should start pianissimo, right? And there's nothing wrong with you starting piano here either. Like, you do not need to mark up your melody, right? So like marking down dynamics in brighter, louder instruments is one thing, but marking up the melody all the time over the texture, that's generally not necessary at all. And like here you've got this balance of mezzo piano in these instruments here. You've got pianissimo right here, and like these pianissimo instruments are really going to be inaudible behind the other texture, right? So better to start off just a simple P espressivo here with your melody continuing on. And yeah, I mean, I think you just want this little touch here, this little kind of breath here, like, you know, that kind of like sort of everything like coming off of the harp glissando. You want everything to just sort of feel really alive, you know, like a little reaction. So, I mean, I almost feel like you could start here P diminuendo with both of these effects coming off of the harp glissando, right? And then as these instruments build, they sort of swallow up the tail end of that little effect. Now, let's talk about the harp glissando. Now, I do not know if you've got this yet, but there is a thing called harp glissando. There's a plugin, okay? Right here, harp glissando. And you basically just pick the beginning and the end points of your glissando. In this case, this low G going up to this high F here, F sharp or F flat, this low G flat going to F flat. And then you just type in all the different pitches that you want, and then it'll just give you a line between two notes. And that's much preferable than to writing them all out, right? It just like, when you write out all the different notes of the glissando, you're just putting more work on the harpist. They'd rather just read a diagram and then just rip their finger from one place to the other, all right? So, well, hopefully not ripping their finger, but yeah, so anyways, just a little bit of balancing right in here. It's not badly scored at all, though. Just like in terms of the actual scoring, is pretty good. I really love this, this really active kinds of scoring here. Now, I don't know why you needed to do this, like why you needed to drop a note here. Maybe this got accidentally got erased. Like, you were changing pages and you accidentally hit the delete button while this note was selected. Anyway, yeah, so just in terms of these, of this kind of trading off sort of tremolo, maybe like shorter groups of bowings would work better in terms of really getting the sense of vibration, the sense of alternation to be more clear, because in really soft scoring, this can just really sort of disappear and just feel like those two pitches are just being held. There really isn't a whole lot of alternation between the two things. I mean, the best way, of course, is just to slur between the two pitches over and over again. But that'll be a really busy part, right? But that will give you the most sense of vibrating, the sort of this very passionate, measured tremolo kind of feeling. Yeah, it's cool the way you bring in the strings here. Okay, so that's all very nice. Okay, yeah. So now we get into our next little subject, or our development. Da 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 bum ba da da dum. Okay, so I mean, here you are at least compensating for the fact that this is that you are emphasizing the upper note here. By giving some doubling to the actual melody here. Da 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 dum, right, is the actual melody. Da 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 dum. So yeah, it's kind of a secondary note there on your first oboe, but still it works all right. And nothing is too heavily textured right in here. It's nice and light. I like the octaves in bassoon and flute. That's a beautiful combination. And you don't double the bassoon at all. You've got doubling on the flute instead. I mean, which is fine. It's not the strongest thing for. It's not really the strongest register for the oboe, really. I mean, a lot of people are opting to start with the flute, where it doesn't have to compete against anybody usually, and then come in with oboe, which is a better, it's a firmer kind of note to be doubling with the violins, but it'll still work fine, just as long as people are really listening to each other. And the oboe will bring out, the bassoon below will bring out some interesting overtones. So that's all good. Now right here, this is totally going to be invisible. You would have to score this harp an octave higher and also mark it up louder if you really want it to come through right in here. Just where it is, if you really want to leave it there, you need to mark it mezzo forte, right, in order to compete with the weight of all of the other parts. Okay, now we're getting to dun 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 dun. So right here, yeah, so celesta, oboe. All right, so keep in mind that right here is just the clunkiest kind of downscale or least resonant. A lot of your choices here are less resonant. I'm just trying to warn you about that. Right in here, this combination and the muted strings and so on. And yeah, then right in here, low celesta notes are much less resonant than high celesta notes and so on. And the combination with the clarinet and the oboe will also tend to swallow the kind of the the beautiful overtones of the celesta. So of course this is scored an octave higher because I mean it's supposed to be sounding, but like even another octave would bring out the celesta more. Okay, just to kind of get it completely out of range of everything else that's going on. Okay, and then you've got harp plus. So right here, you really want to control the sound. You know what? I would put a sensa sword right here. Okay, so it will apply to all of the strings going forward, as opposed to like see here, it's 2 desks sensa sword and then tutti divisi. Okay, so that's all good, but it doesn't tell the other players to take their mutes off, right? So just tell everybody to take their mutes off right after this bar, right? So just sensa sword here. They've got 2 bars to move their little rubber thingy off of the bridge and then back down to the tailpiece, and then 2 desks. 3 desks, whatever, and then tutti divisi, right? And then, so here for this big slide here on glissando, okay, so you've got 2 things fighting here. There's 2 big problems with this. Okay, the first is that the C string is not going to give you that, that high D way up there. I mean, you could sort of technically get it, all right, but if you do manage to reach that pitch and get it to sound, how can you play sul tasto with the bow crossing your fingers, right? The bow needs to play over the fingerboard, and you have basically, by forcing the finger to slide all the way up to a very high place on that string, you are taking away the ability of the player to play sul tasto, because they basically would be bowing their fingers, which would be in the way, right? I have a video about this called The Ceiling on Sul Tasto, which I want you to go check out, Isaac. Okay, so it would be safer if you did if you did a slide from D to D, from D to D above middle C, rather than 2 octaves. Or if you started on the higher D and then slid up to, the D in the staff and slid up. But like the 2 octave thing, the player's going to have to fake it by starting on maybe somewhere a position on the G string and then just sort of sliding up from that note. But still, like sul tasto is just kind of a risky thing. And there's really no need for you to be sul tasto. I mean, is anybody else playing sul tasto? Right? I just don't understand the need for sul tasto on a glissando like that. I mean, especially with the risk of smashing into, the finger smashing into the bow playing over the fingerboard, right? So just think about those things, all right? Think about the logistics of certain effects not working together well, all right? All right, but anyways, everybody else there is fairly okay, bum 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 bum, and I really like the way that you just really pull the rug out from under the texture here, and then just go straight to these kind of lower middle winds, English horn plus clarinets plus a little bit of cello on the bottom there. That's really a lovely idea right in there, and you don't take the flute down too low. Also, all of this works pretty well. I mean, there's almost, so like right up to this B flat, you can have a good combination with the first clarinet there. Okay, and then and bassoon and everything else. So I mean, it's all fine. I would say the horns could be a little softer, right? Because they were going to tend to take over this texture a little bit, right? Especially with without too much competition in the middle, because you've taken your violas out of the picture, right? So there isn't a strong mid-range instrument in there. Not that violas are that strong. But yeah, right in here, I would just say mark this at, I would actually say piano rather than mezzo piano. Just piano, don't worry about the diminuendo, and then come in right here. And then I think it'll just be a way more balanced kind of a sound. Now, going on. Da 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 ba da dum bum ba da dum bum 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 bum. Okay. So yeah, here combination of you know, I mean, I like some of the scoring that you've got here. You know, da 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 da. You know, it's like it's, you know, you are thinking about the bowing. Okay, but this is, I think that this right here probably could be shorter bows. You know, like, do you really want da? Right? There's no emphasis on this beat. Da da, or even da da da, or even da da da. Right? Up, down, up. Right? Down, up, down, up, down, up. I mean, yeah, I mean, even in here, you know, maybe these slurs are a little too long, right? So I mean, just think about, really just think about all the things. It's not enough just to make it a little shorter than the piano thing, you know, just like really think about the motion of the bow and the stress on what, you know, like actually having the bite of a down bow or up bow starting on a specific note, giving it that rhythmic pulse, right? It's not as critical in winds, but you know, I mean, it makes a difference. Okay, so but I mean, other than that, this is nice, like da da da. It's, yeah, so you know, that's good. And then da 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 da. You know, great that you do not have flute here, because that's like, it gives you more control. You got more of an arc here with you know, and then you've got your clarinets. This is a really great way to use 3 clarinets, I've got to say. You know, that's very nice scoring in combination. You know, and this combination right in here will give the strings a really beautiful edge. Like clarinets plus strings just really have just a nice full body tone that just really cuts. You know what I mean? It's yeah, it's a really great combination. And then, you know, then here you throw in just a little touch of trumpet. And yeah, I mean, there is no way that you are going to get anything less than a mezzo forte on that high A sharp, you know, high A sharp accent. Yeah, and then finally the last big push. See, maybe here you could have picked a choice of a different instrument to double, because it's sort of the same thing that happened before, right? Right. But I mean, the context is different enough, right? And some of the things that you've added, some timpani, bassoon in there, a little bit of help. It's, you know, it's a bit spare actually the way that this is scored, but it's refreshing. You know, and then you can really come in here with some power, right? I would say the horns could be a little fuller in here. You've got 4 horns, but you know, I don't know. I mean, it is nice the way that you scored this. So yeah. Anyhow, and then the little resolution right in here. It's very, very small. Like, you know, you've got a bigger texture here, and then you just really go down to a very, you know, very small, and which you already did in the previous page, right? So once again, you're going to like the option of a very small ensemble here. You know, basically just your double winds, your double reeds. Okay, all right. So going on, you know, da 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 da. Here we're getting to the very elegant section here. You got horns, you got timpani, it's kind of hovering in the background there, a little boosh on the tam-tam, some harp, right? Okay, yeah, and nice balance too. Yeah, it's nicely balanced. You know, da 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 dum, ba da 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 dum, ba da 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 bum. Yeah, I mean, there's, you know, could one of these peaks be a forte, right? Right, because there's a lot of going up to mezzo forte and then backing off, right? There's just something in the piano part. But I mean, there's no need for us to always follow that, right? We can always try to get the best color out of the instrument, which sometimes might be exaggerating the original dynamic. I mean, but all the same, if you're going to stick to it, then this is a good balance, okay? And it's good that you're also keeping the winds in the background as well, so that the strings can really speak here. Okay, that will definitely be a string-dominated passage, even though really the texture is more about winds and horns. All right, so now we're getting to the final part. Bum 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 da 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 dum. All right, so we got a little bit of contra coming in there finally, doubling the double basses and strings. So yeah, so right here, like once again, I felt the timbre was a bit kind of downscale, a bit anticlimactic. Right, but I mean, of course, you want to build up to it. But yeah, the other thing is like I always feel like there needs to be sort of an emphasis on the downbeat of the second bar. I just feel like there's like it's a little lifeless. Da da da. Right? What about that slur? Articulation. And then we've got our little answering cascade of notes on the second page here. Da 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 da. Yeah, just like flute, English horn. Yeah. So look. So by the time you get to the end here, you're going to have English horn getting more powerful in resonance and flute getting less powerful in resonance, right? So just like they really are going to have to control. This is not going to be the easiest thing for the players to balance, and there may be a tendency for the lower instruments to play out over the flute to a degree as things go on, right? So diminuendo marks here, and then maybe just leave this alone. Okay, and then strings. So this is much brighter and more involved, right? The way that this is scored, and then you've got your pad of heavy brass and contrabassoon again. You're giving the poor contrabassoonist a little time to breathe here. Okay, and then reaction once again wins, and I like the fact that you use a different configuration. So you get like, and I mean the thing that matters the most is really the top, that top line, because that's what's going to be heard by the ear the most, right? And then the other elements can be, they're pretty much the same as before, English horn as before, clarinet and bassoon, but it'll be different enough to feel different to the listener, even though it's not that big of a difference. And I like the way that you're just kind of putting a big, thump at the beginning of each of these 4-bar groups. Here you only need like a quarter note at the beginning of the bass drum, because like the bass drum player might just damp it anyways, because it's the hall that gets the resonance, right? As the hall is the case, the hoop, the shell of the bass drum is really more about like tuning and quality of tone, right? The actual resonating cavity for the bass drum is the concert hall. Okay, so once the player has gone thump on that membrane on the drum head, then the sound travels and bounces around the auditorium. So there's no real need for it to be a long, pitch, to be, an extended note duration. All right, and then here, we once again kind of boom. It's sort of the same bass note every time, but you're changing things around enough, right? So now it's the winds that are holding down the pad, and the clarinet on top, horns on the bottom, 1 and 3. And this is actually the right way to do it, rather than having 1 and 2, because like you have your 2 glory hogs, right? Your first and your third are just really going to play out, and that's a better companion in that instance than the second for the first, right? It's almost like, when you want the 2 players to be completely simpatico with each other, right? Then you really score the first and the second, and especially if like the intonation is a concern, right? Just like really, but like if you want to kind of poke the first a little so that they play as good as possible, then you double lines like this with the third, because then like the first is no way is the first going to let the third be a better player than them, right? They're going to, they're going to show that whippersnapper, they're going to lead that whippersnapper. Now, I'm honestly speaking, that's not really the psychology of all horn groups, but maybe it is. I don't know. Most really, really great horn groups that I've worked with, Auckland Philharmonia's horns of about 14 years ago, that was just the most great section. My wife was on second, and then the first and the third were just both amazing musicians, and then the fourth came in, Simon Williams, and they just worked together so well. Just such a brilliant section. That was one, and then of course the horn section from from San Francisco Symphony. I worked with those guys. Those guys are amazing too. So I mean, that kind of, it isn't really like petty and competitive and so on. Same thing for New Zealand Symphony Orchestra. I've worked with different versions of their horn section, as they've had a lot of changes lately. They've always been great and like not really that competitive, but it does happen. So it's just there's a psychological element to it. Is all I need to say about that. All right. Now here, there's really no need to go half. I know, like, you sort of want to maintain this really careful sort of divisi, and then just make sure that like the instrument's all balanced. But there's really no need to go to half players there. In fact, I would say the top needs to be nice and strong because of everything else that's going on up there. Okay, just like you really will start to lose this this top note if it's too weak. Because like the players down here, they're going to make their, unless you're telling these players to sort of play under their possible, their normal sense of loudness, then this is just going to seem softer than pianissimo. Okay, so it's better just to have all the players playing. All right, and then you have finally, you got your piccolo and your second flute there, just a little bit of doubling, which is wise so that this player can get ready. And wow, yeah. So I just don't think that you are going to get pianissimo up there on that high B. So what I would do is I would actually have your first flute player take over this F sharp. So here's how to get around this. All right. So overlap on this note, right? So dovetail this note here, so that the first player takes over this note, right? And then the piccolo immediately takes over here and gets down to this E, and then overlap back down to the first. Okay, because otherwise, high B on a flute is just, I mean, it's possible to play it pianissimo, but man, it is just really it's torture for most players. So look, don't mark a pianissimo on a high B. It's just really not, it's not a cool way to score. So just way better to have the piccolo player to handle this where it's just totally in their range. Just have them, have them play the first four notes, and then at the C sharp, have the, which is going to be right here in, on this space, have the first come back in and just play the rest of it, right? It's a little bit of going back and forth, but boy, the players would really thank you for that. Okay, everything else is fine. But yeah, I like the different cascading that you've got here. Okay, and then we finally end up with here, okay, 2 solo violins. Okay, so the solo violins need to be piano, right, which you've got that there. Okay, that will work with your little piccolo way up there, also piano. Okay, yeah, so these high notes right in here are going to be just a little spicy, if you know what I mean. Like that way up there on that high G sharp. That's the G sharp, it's gonna cut at the ear a little bit. All right, so just be warned. It's not the most comfortably, beautifully, effortlessly poetic note right up there. Okay, but you've also got your solo violins here, and I would actually put these guys on their own separate staff. Okay, because this is just really confusing the way that you got this scored. Just, you know, jump in, put in an OCS staff, drop the solo part onto there, and you're going to be fine. Okay, and then all the other guys that are doing stuff in here, that's all good. You know, it's a long time to be holding your breath, but it's still all fine. It's very soft. Yeah, and then a little touch here. I think that this can also be a pianissimo right here, the horn, right? Yeah. Or, I mean, yeah, it could be piano. I mean, there's no need for the dynamic to be, right? And this is obviously intended to be the first player, so yeah, so this needs 1 written over it. Okay, and then the dynamic instructions below the notes wherever possible. Okay, and then you got like your little cymbal roll right in there. And it's all really charming the way that you scored the end of this. It's really great, Isaac. And yeah, I mean, wow, you know, getting another score from you and having you support on Patreon, that just really means a lot, you know. Yeah, it's kind of strange how like that Patreon is kind of almost its own crowd, you know, and there are a lot of times when like I'll drop content on there and like I'll get like 0 reaction at first, but then later on people will say, oh man, I'm really following that. When's the next installment? You know, so yeah, so yeah, the Patreon crowd is really kind of different. It feels like people who are really, you know, progressing their craft forwards and oftentimes working on their careers and are already possibly doing professional stuff, or definitely doing it. So yeah, so just, you know, I appreciate like having somebody with, you know, with your obvious talents in the group and as part of these challenges. So look, any comments that you've got for the other Brev participants especially, if you could drop those on Patreon, and, you know, just telling people what you like about somebody's work or that you like their work, I think that just really makes us, you know, makes the Patreon crowd just as, you know, just as much of its own community as the Facebook group, right? So yeah, so please do, if you can, or just leave a comment on the YouTube page, or on Facebook would also be great to hear you engage. So yeah, so any comments, any questions, you know, it's all good, and you know, and thanks again for supporting the channel, and yeah, and it's just great to get another score from you, man. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about these evaluations today. I'm just gonna keep going and see how many I can get done today, a Monday, a day ahead of the Sunday in the United States and Europe. I'll just see how much I can get done today, and you know, really enjoying myself so far today. It's great. Thanks so much.